A very good morning to everyone. I, Sahil Kanade, welcome you all on the behalf of Team Pentagraph for today's PentaTalk knowledge session. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on Saturday morning for this month's PentaTalk knowledge session. As it is rightly said, personal finance is more personal than its finance, and most important quality for investor is temperament and not intellect. So today's topic, that is Z-Kit bag, using Army's mission planning for framework, is somehow related to that as well. Now you must be wondering what is the correlation between army and investment, right? But you will be surprised to see there are some interesting parallels that can be drawn. Like both fields will require strategic thinking, risk management, discipline, and focus on the long-term horizon, long-term outcomes, you can say. So to enlighten us with this subject, today we have with us Mr. Ajit Menon, Chief Executive Officer of PGIM Asset Management Company. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Sunil.
yeah, as CEO, Ajit sir oversees all aspects of the asset management business, including mutual funds, portfolio management services, and all. An industry veteran, sir has over more than 2 decades of leadership experience in mutual fund industry. He joined PGIM from the Tata Asset Management Company, where he was head of the strategy. He is also associated with key industry bodies like and is sort of the speaker at the various domestic forums and the conferences. He has also authored papers on matters pertaining to AMC business, co-designed a 6-month certification course in wealth management and a 2-month retirement readiness certification course for business partners. So we welcome you, sir, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation for this month's Pentadoc series.
Thank you. Thank
I
you,
would
Sahil.
also, yeah, I would also like to tell all the participants and the investors that we will have Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A tab, and we will take that at the end. Thank you. Over to you, sir. Please.
Thank you, Sahil, and thanks to you and Rahul, Anil, Meghsham, everybody at Pentagraph for this invitation. I hope कि आज का जो सुबह है हम सारे जितने भी निवेशक अभी ज्वाइन किए हैं और हमारे जितने साथी हैं, we'll have a very good session in figuring out how the Army's mission planning framework, which is called the Z-Kit B.A.G, वो हम हमारे investment planning में use कर सकते हैं किसी तरीके से. So this is something that I developed a few years ago after reading a couple of articles on how the Army plans a mission, and I found it that this mission planning framework can actually be used for business planning, it can be used for investment planning, and I'm hoping that this will be very interesting for people to see. And more importantly, जब हम लोग investments के बारे में सोचते हैं तो कुछ ना कुछ मतलब याद नहीं रहता, काफी चीजें बोली हुई चीजें, कुछ रूल्स हैं वो याद नहीं रहता. तो एक तरीके से शायद ये Z-Kit B.A.G ऐसा एक फ्रेमवर्क हो सकता है कि आप एक बार सुनने के बाद वो आप याद रख सकते हो और कुछ स्टेप्स की मतलब आप ऐसी जानकारी पाएं कि अगर कहीं पे आप अटक रहे हो या कुछ आप करना चाहते हो तो यू हैव अ वे ऑफ हाउ टू गेट आउट ऑफ इट, हाउ टू थिंक अबाउट इट बाय यूजिंग दिस फ्रेमवर्क. लेकिन सबसे पहले मैं ये जो Z-Kit B.A.G है, इस Z-Kit B.A.G के फ्रेमवर्क के बारे में बताने से पहले मैं हमारे जो ऑडियंस हैं उनको एक छोटा सा एक सिंपल कॉन्सेप्ट मैं समझाना चाह रहा था कि और महाभारत के जरिए, महाभारत ऐसी कहानी है कि वी हैव ऑल हर्ड अबाउट इट फ्रॉम आवर चाइल्डहुड एंड यू नो इट इज समथिंग वेयर our elders have always said that you know जो कुछ भी है वो महाभारत में है और जो महाभारत में नहीं है वो दुनिया में भी नहीं है, in the sense that everything is in that epic, and it is a beautiful story which people remember forever, ages and years. लेकिन महाभारत का यहाँ पर हमारे इस प्रेजेंटेशन में क्या मायने रखता है और मैं क्या पॉइंट लाना चाहता हूँ is more about this concept of in the Mahabharata, which is very different as an interpretation of the story. So I'm trying to bring here a different interpretation of the story. शायद हमारे जो ऋषि महर्षि थे वो अपने आप को समझने के लिए उन्होंने इस कहानी को ऐसा एक रूप दिया. तो आप ऐसे समझिए, मैं and let me just get into this. We all know that Dhritarashtra is the blind king. अंधा है धृतराष्ट्र. और कहा जाता है कि जो ऋषि मुनियों की इसमें जो मेन फोकस था, पॉइंट था, ये लोगों को बताने के लिए कि हमारा जो ब्रेन है वो धृतराष्ट्र है हमारा. इट इज ब्लाइंड. our brain is our Dhritarashtra. It is blind. It does not take a decision on its own. It has to get information from what our eyes see or what our nose smells or what we taste or what we hear or what we feel. Then it takes a decision. और हमारे ब्रेन के ऊपर 100 कौरवों का जो है इम्पैक्ट आ सकता है जो नेगेटिव. So the 100 Kauravas are nothing but the representative of negative influences on the brain. कहा जाता है कि एंगर और जेलसी सबसे बड़ी जो है सिंस हैं या सबसे बड़ी जो नेगेटिव इन्फ्लुएंसेस है, विच इज रिप्रेजेंटेटिव ऑफ दुर्योधन एंड दुशासन. इस 100 कौरवों, ये नेगेटिव इन्फ्लुएंसेस को अगर हमें डिफीट करना है, सामना करना है, तो हमारे 5 पांडव की बहुत जरूरत है. एंड दिस इज दैट एवरी ह्यूमन बीइंग ऑन अर्थ हैज ओनली 5 सेंसेस: साइट, स्मेल, टेस्ट, हियरिंग एंड टच. हर आदमी के अंदर यही 5 सेंस है. तो ये कहानी का मूल्य ये है कि ये जो 5 पांडव है, ये कोई नहीं, हमारे सेंसेस हैं, हमारे इंद्रिय हैं. और इस इंद्रिय को अगर हम जितना शार्प कर सके तो हम ये 100 कौरवों को के ऊपर हम लोग जीत पा सकते हैं, या और वी कैन डिफीट दिस एंड हैव आवर ब्रेन टेक ऑल द राइट डिसीजंस दैट वी वांट. द्रौपदी का जो रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, इट इज ऑफ पर्पस एंड पैशन. सिर्फ 5 हमारे सेंसेस के साथ अगर हम ये काम करें कि हम उसको शार्प बनाएं, हम उसको देखभाल करें, इज नॉट इनफ. We need all those 5 senses to work towards a purpose for our life. And Draupadi in the story is the purpose that keeps the 5 brothers together right up to the end. Krishna is representative of our soul and our conscience. वो अंदर की जो आवाज है जो कहता है कि ये सही है, ये गलत है, ये धर्म है, ये अधर्म है, जो भी है, वो अंदर की आवाज जो है, जो सोल या कॉन्शियस कहे, वो कृष्ण का प्रतीक है हमारा. लेकिन इस कहानी में मेरे लिए तो सबसे ज्यादा जो इंट्रीगिंग सा कैरेक्टर है वो है फिर कर्ण. कौन है इस कहानी में? क्योंकि कर्ण तो सबसे बड़ा भाई था, 5 पांडव का पहला भाई था. तो देन हु इज ही? एंड the esoteric meaning of the Mahabharata says that Karna is representative of ego, our ego, which is why ego has to be killed if you want to win any game in life. हर कोई प्रोफेशनल या पर्सनल परिस्थिति में अगर आप देखें तो किसी ना किसी की ईगो के वजह से हम लड़खड़ा जाते हैं या कोई गलतियां कर लेते हैं. खुद की ईगो से, किसी और के ईगो से प्रॉब्लम्स खड़ी हो जाती है. तो इस कहानी का एक, महाभारत का एक अलग सा ये अर्थ ऐसा भी बनता है कि हमारे ब्रेन के बारे में, हमारे नेगेटिव इन्फ्लुएंसेस जो ब्रेन पे होते हैं, हमारा जो काम होना चाहिए कि हमारे 5 सेंसेस एक पर्पस के साथ रखे, हमारी कॉन्शियंस और सोल से सुने, और ईगो जो है उसको हम जिस हद तक हो सके we try and control it to win anything that we want to win. So our brain is essentially blind. It is influenced by 100 different negative biases. Control over your 5 senses can defeat these negative biases. A clear purpose is essential. Enable Sarathi can, like Krishna, can help you in your journey, in your investment journey. Your advisor, in this case Pentagraph, is your Sarathi that helps you. And ego is a part of you, but you have to win over it. And therefore, I wanted to bring this mythology, this story of the Mahabharata to why am I talking about human behavior biases that we have to win in this war, and what better way to look at it than an army's mission planning tool, which is the Z-K.I.T B.A.G. Ab Z-K.I.T B.A.G is something that I had read from Captain Raghu Raman. He was 11 years in the armed forces. He's been in corporate life. He was the first CEO of National Intelligence Grid. And he's a fellow of the Observer Research Foundation. आपने शायद YouTube में या कहीं और कैप्टन रघु रमन के कुछ वीडियोस या आर्टिकल्स पढ़े होंगे. मैंने जब रघु रमन का लिखा हुआ ये Z-K.I.T B.A.G के बारे में जब आर्टिकल मैंने पढ़ा तो मुझे लगा कि मैं इसको यूज कर सकता हूँ. और इस आर्टिकल में एक line जो है, it stood out to me, and that line is that the army's lessons are written in blood because mistakes come back in body bags. कहने का मतलब ये कि आर्मी अपने प्लानिंग में मिस्टेक्स नहीं कर सकती, क्योंकि हर गलती के पीछे कोई शहीद हो सकता है, कोई, we may lose a soldier, so it has to be perfect. in the way it plans. So I thought, why can't we take that process, that framework of the army and use it for our investments and see that we can reduce our mistakes or eliminate our mistakes the most. तो Z-K.I.T B.A.G का जो फुल फॉर्म है ये मैं आपको बहुत जल्दी से बताना चाहता हूं और उसके बाद हम हर एक पॉइंट पे चले जाएंगे। Z का मतलब है जमीनी निशान। जमीनी निशान का मतलब ये कि अगर आप इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की दुनिया में इसको यूज कर रहे हैं तो क्या आप इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की दुनिया को पूरी तरह जानते हैं? जैसा कोई एक आर्मी का मिशन जब उतरता है तो उन्हें ये जानकारी होनी चाहिए कि आर वी फाइटिंग दिस इन द माउंटेन्स, इज इट इन द फॉरेस्ट, is it in the desert, is it on the sea, is it in a city, how does it look, north south east west में है क्या, हमें छुपने के लिए, हमें अटैक करने के लिए क्या क्या है वो जमीनी निशान। तो हमें पहला जो स्टेप होता है कोई भी प्लानिंग फ्रेमवर्क में अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स का, तो ये जानना कि इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की दुनिया, इन्वेस्टमेंट्स का जो जमीनी निशान है वो क्या है। दूसरा के का मतलब है खबर। जब हमें पता ये चलता है कि हमारी जमीनी निशान ये है, इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की दुनिया में मैं इस चीजों के बारे में जानकारी या इस चीजों के से डील करना चाहता हूं, देन वी शुड हैव ऑल द इंफॉर्मेशन अबाउट इट। For the army, information about the enemy, information about the territory, information about themselves, information about their equipment, everything is important. So the second step is khabar. The third step is irada. I stands for irada, कि हमारा गोल क्या है। अगर हमें पता है कि जमीनी निशान ये है, खबर ये है, तो इरादा क्या होना चाहिए। इरादा शॉर्ट टर्म हो सकता है, इरादा लॉन्ग टर्म हो सकता है, और हर इरादे को हम 2 या 3 स्टेप्स में बांट भी सकते हैं। तो ये नहीं है कि हमें एक ही गोल हो, हमारे लाइफ में काफी सारे गोल्स होते हैं और उस गोल्स को सेट करने के लिए, उस इरादों को सेट करने के लिए एक प्रोसेस भी होता है। इरादा सेट करने के बाद टी होता है तरीका। तो अगर ये जमीनी निशान है, अगर हमारे पास खबर है और इरादा भी पक्का है, तो क्या तरीका अपनाना चाहिए कि वो हम इरादे पे पहुंचे। सो व्हाट शुड बी द स्ट्रैटेजी फॉर दैट ऑब्जेक्टिव दैट वी वांट टू अचीव। द नेक्स्ट स्टेप इज बंदोबस्त। अगर मैं स्ट्रैटेजी ये अडॉप्ट करने वाला हूं कि मैं डायरेक्ट इक्विटी में जाऊं या मैं म्यूचुअल फंड्स के थ्रू जाऊं या मैं खुद से करूं या मैं मेरे एडवाइजर्स के हेल्प से करूं, क्या स्ट्रैटेजी, किस एसेट क्लासेस को आप अडॉप्ट करोगे, तो फिर आपके पास रिसोर्सेस क्या है, क्या आपके पास रिसर्च के लिए टूल्स क्या है, आपके पास क्या समय है, ये सारा जो बंदोबस्त करना पड़ता है कि कौन सी स्ट्रैटेजी को हम अडॉप्ट करें। तो दैट इज द नेक्स्ट स्टेप। A is for administration, that's the only English word in this full form, which is कि हम measure कैसे करते हैं, progress को measure कैसे करते हैं। आर्मी एक बार जमीनी निशान के बाद, खबर रखने के बाद, इरादा पक्का करने के बाद, जब स्ट्रैटेजी अडॉप्ट करती है, बंदोबस्त लगा के निकल जाता है, then somebody has to measure, are we making progress, are we going towards the goal in the time that we want to go towards the goal, and that is बंदोबस्त। And the last step is a very interesting step. G stands for घड़ी मिलाओ। इसका मतलब यह है कि जब पलटन उतरती है किसी मिशन के लिए, तो सारा कुछ डिसाइड होने के बाद फाइनल स्टेप होता है कि हर सोल्जर अपनी घड़ी जो है वो अपने कमांडर की घड़ी से मिलाता है, ताकि जो भी इंस्ट्रक्शन हो वो इंस्ट्रक्शन एग्जैक्टली उसी टाइम पे फॉलो हो, क्योंकि एवरीबडी विल बी स्प्रेड आउट ऑन द बैटलफील्ड। When the commander says that shelling is going to start at 22:40, then you should not be 10 minutes late because you might get caught in the firing. You have to be completely in sync with the commander. और इन्वेस्टमेंट की दुनिया में वो कमांडर होता है आपका फाइनेंशियल प्लान। उस फाइनेंशियल प्लान के साथ आपका सिंक्रोनाइज होना, वो आप ही की प्लान है, आप और अपने एडवाइजर्स के साथ जो आप डिसाइड करते हैं उसके साथ सिंक्रोनाइज रहना ये जरूरी है। तो अभी हम आगे ये देखेंगे कि हर ये जो स्टेप है, जमीनी निशान, खबर, इरादा, तरीका, बंदोबस्त, एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, घड़ी मिलाओ, इसको हम इन्वेस्टमेंट्स के दुनिया में हम कैसे यूज कर सकते हैं और इसका रेलेवेंस क्या है। तो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद जमीनी निशान। फॉर द आर्मी it means the theater of war, it means the terrain on which they are fighting. For the investor, it is just about familiarizing yourself कि आप कहां ऑपरेट कर रहे हो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स में। और मेरा ये मानना है कि आप इन्वेस्टमेंट्स जब कर रहे हो तो यू आर एक्चुअली बोथ इन द इंडियन इकोनॉमी एंड द ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी। यू आर नॉट जस्ट प्लेइंग इन द इंडियन इकोनॉमी, You are affected by everything that happens everywhere in the world, and therefore it matters to you to have some familiarity about what's happening, not just in India, but also all over the world. Today, the Indian stock markets is about a little over $3 trillion in size, but the global stock market is more than $110 trillion in size. So we are less than 2% of the global market, and we are putting all our money in that $2 trillion or $3.5 trillion market, whereas there is $100+ trillion market out there. And there are many things in those markets which are not available in India. So if you are an investor, you should be at least aware, you should at least familiarize, you should at least ask the questions of your advisor. What is available? What am I missing? What should I add to my Zamini Nishan, understanding of my Zamini Nishan? So let's look at it. No, investing is what? Investing is about buying businesses and becoming an owner. What is a good business? A good business is, simple definition is that it should be a growing business. If it's a stagnant business, it's not a good business. It's a growing business. What is a growing business? A growing business is a business that always continuously leverages human innovation, human ingenuity, human progress. And human ingenuity and innovation सिर्फ इंडिया की बस की बात नहीं है, पूरी ग्लोबल बात है. It is about everything all over the world in terms of ingenuity and innovation. And यहाँ पे जो कौरव, जो 100 कौरव की हमने बात की, जो इस हमारे बायसेस होते हैं, तो वहां पे ये बायस हमारे सामने आता है होम बायस. Globally, this is called a home bias, where most investors are very narrowly focused only on where they are and what they can see and what they read in their morning newspaper. And this is a bias that will affect you. This is a kaurav that affects you in your Zamini Nishan. And therefore, the question that you should be asking is, as an investor, मेरी जो Zamini Nishan है, वो कितना narrow है मेरा view? Yeah, how wide is my playing field? How can I see the entire Zamini Nishan? What questions should I be asking? कि मुझे अगर पैसे लगाने हैं तो क्या क्या अवेलेबल है, क्या क्या मार्केट्स है, क्या क्या आइडियाज हैं जहां पे मैं इन्वेस्ट कर सकता हूं. I'll give you a simple reason. We at PGIM, we have international funds and things like that. Why do we have it? There are many sectors. If you all like equity investing, I'm just assuming that if we like in equity investing, you have to realize that there are so many sectors and stocks which are not available in the Indian stock market. पूरी की पूरी सेक्टर ही अवेलेबल नहीं है, और ये ऐसे सेक्टर्स हैं जो बहुत पैसे बनाते हैं. Even during recessions and bad times, there are sectors that do well. Let me give you an example of a sector which is not there in India but is a very big sector internationally, and that is the sector of luxury. Louis Vuitton, Ferrari, Moet Chandon, these are companies where, you know, there is no recession for high net worth people or rich people. They will buy goods what they want, regardless of what's happening to interest rate or what's happening to economy. It affects the rest of us, the middle class and the lower class, not the rich. And luxury as a sector is very big globally, and we don't have that sector in India. Maybe you can say Titan is a stock that qualifies a little bit, but I'm just saying that we don't have that sector. It's a big sector. Cloud computing as a sector, or battery operated vehicles today that we're seeing. So there are many areas which you should be, as an investor, exposed to and participate in. तो जानकारी अपनी जमीनी निशान की पहला स्टेप. सेकंड इज खबर. आर्मी के लिए ये खबर होता है कि ऑन द एनिमी, ऑन आवरसेल्व्स, बट फॉर द इन्वेस्टर, निवेशक के लिए जो इंपॉर्टेंट है कि मेरे पास क्या ऐसा खबर होना चाहिए जिसके ऊपर मैं एक्शन ले सकता हूं. एक्शनेबल इंटेलिजेंस कह दीजिए उसको. बहुत सारे ओपिनियंस होते हैं, बहुत सारे हमको एक्सपर्ट से सुनने को मिलता है या पढ़ने को मिलता है, बट व्हाट कैन वी टेक एक्शन ऑन? सो खबर की स्टेप, जो सेकंड स्टेप है, वहां पे वी हैव टू थिंक अबाउट व्हाट इज योर फिल्टर. आप जब एनिमी, जो इन्वेस्टिंग की एनिमी है, तो इन्वेस्टिंग की एनिमीज हैं इन्फ्लेशन है, वॉलेटिलिटी है, आपके जो पर्सनल बायसेस होते हैं वो है. सो यू हैव टू थिंक दैट ये जो इन्फ्लेशन, ये जो वॉलेटिलिटी है, जो खुद की जो खामियां या बायसेस हैं, व्हाट इज द फिल्टर दैट आई यूज एंड विच आई कैन पुट टू एक्ट. So if you think, we have to first remember in khabar that inflation agar enemy hai, to interest rates are connected to this enemy of ours, which is inflation. If there is higher inflation, the government will increase interest rates to bring it down, and vice versa. When inflation is lower, interest rates will come down. Now, higher interest rate is good for saving, but it's bad for business, because business does not want high interest rates to borrow and put up a factory. It wants lower interest rate to put up a factory, increase capacity, increase its sales, things like that, which basically means that high interest rate is not good for equity. High interest rate is good for saving, for fixed income. Low interest rate is bad for savers, good for business. So very, very simple filter that you have to have for your information on which you can act is just knowing how interest rates and inflation are connected, because that is connected to all kinds of businesses. Because you're investing, whether you're investing in equity or bonds or whatever it is, these are ultimately companies at the back which are listed on the stock exchange, जिसके bonds होते हैं, जिसके shares हैं, और उन सब पे inflation और interest rate का काफी बड़ा impact होता है. So when you have information that globally inflation is going up, India mein inflation is going up, you can almost say that boss, yahan pe ab equity pe impact aana shuru hoga, kyunki interest rate badhna shuru hoga inflation ko control karne ke liye. Aur jab aapko ye sunne mein aata hai ki ab interest rate ki jo trajectory hai wo government ne rok di hai, ab aage badhate nahi hai wo, aur shayad aage jaake ghatayenge usko, you know that equity will start doing well. And that is what you saw over the last 18 months, for instance, play out when inflation was going up in 22 after the Russia-Ukraine war, and all governments started increasing interest rate post-COVID and post the war. You saw equity also getting beaten down. You saw fixed income also making losses. And now you reached a stage where most of the global markets, Indian market, have paused. They are not any longer increasing interest rate. So confidence has started to come back in the market कि शायद अभी और ऊपर नहीं जाएगा interest rate, अब यहाँ से कम होगा. तो सारे equity market में पैसा उतरने लगा है. Equity market over the last 3-4 months have been doing well and things like that. So you can see the connection of the khabar that you need to keep. But what is going to be your bias? यहाँ पे आपका कौरव कौन है? यहाँ पे कौरव का नाम है herd behavior. यानी कि whatever you read, you see, you will be only taking action on basis of that what you're reading. WhatsApp यूनिवर्सिटी तो है ही, तो अगर ऐसा लग रहा है कि सारे ही equity market में जा रहे हैं, तो आपको भी लगेगा कि मुझे मिस आउट नहीं करना चाहिए, तो मुझे भी इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए. ऐसा लग रहा है कि लॉकडाउन के बाद पूरा मार्केट अभी नेगेटिव होने वाला है, सारा ही रिडेम्पशन या पैसे निकालने में लगे, तो आपको ऐसा लगेगा कि सब अगर कर रहे हैं तो सही होगा, मुझे भी करना चाहिए. हर्ड बिहेवियर इज देयर इन ऑलमोस्ट एवरी फील्ड and market that we think about, and a lot of people take advantage of herd behavior. Football teams, when their fans come to the stadium, it's herd behavior on both sides. So there is a lot of ways that this world takes advantage, and there is a disadvantage to what is called herd behavior in human beings. But you have to have the khabar कि herd behavior हो सकता है. So then how do I differentiate between fact and opinion? आज ओपिनियन देने वाले बहुत एक्सपर्ट्स होंगे, टीवी पे हो, न्यूज़पेपर में हो, पॉडकास्ट में हो, they may give their opinion, but is it a fact? Is it a fact that the whole world, now after COVID, all equity markets will, not do well? Is it a fact that interest rates will go up or down? We don't know. We have to use our common sense when we are looking at our information to say, what is the information I can use? And you can actually only use facts. And many a time, through Pentagraph, you will see that you can get facts if you look at long-term, what has happened in similar scenarios, in similar cycles, in similar stock categories, with similar interest rates and inflation scenarios, what happens. So when we use the information that we have gathered over 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, which is very easily available today for us, that becomes important. That, acha, whatever may be happening right now, I understand. But when you look at it over the last 30, 40 years, when this kind of a scenario happens, this is likely to happen. So let's take action accordingly. So you can look at those facts and discuss those facts and then take the decision, rather than just a emotional opinion that somebody says that, now Modi Sarkar will come back in 24, बहुत फॉरेन का पैसा आएगा तो मार्केट्स बहुत ही ऊंचा चला जाएगा, तो आज के आज हमें पैसा लगाना चाहिए. इसमें कोई गलती नहीं है, लेकिन ये ओपिनियन है. ये बहुत अच्छा लगता है सुनने को, और हमें कॉमन सेंसिकल भी लगता है कि शायद हाँ ऐसा ही होगा. लेकिन बहुत कुछ हो सकता है, हमें ये नहीं पता कि व्हाट कैन हैपन टुमारो और डे आफ्टर. बट वी कैन लुक एट द पास्ट, वी कैन लुक एट द फैक्ट्स एंड द डेटा, and then take decisions. That's the only point of this. The next step is irada. आर्मी के पास जब अपनी जमीनी निशान और उसके बाद जो खबर है एनिमी के बारे में, टेरिटरी के बारे में, सेल्फ के बारे में, फिर वो इरादा करते हैं कि आज रात तक हम यहां जंगलों में पहुंचेंगे, वहां से हम इस ब्रिज को पहले उड़ाएंगे, उसके बाद हम रिवर क्रॉस करके जो है, या सेकेंड स्टेप हो सकता है कि हम ब्रिज क्रॉस करके हमारे जो साथी हैं वहां पे बंदी बने हैं उनको रेस्क्यू करते हैं, और वापस आते वक्त तीसरा इरादा है कि हम ब्रिज को उड़ा दें. तो ये उनका गोल्स हुआ. आपका भी एज एन इन्वेस्टर इट्स योर गोल्स, एंड गोल्स आर शॉर्ट टर्म एंड लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स. यू विल हैव बोथ. एंड आई फील दैट one way to think about goals is to think about this acronym SMART. Goals को smart होनी चाहिए. Smart है specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound. You can think about a goal being a goal only if it fits this definition: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound. If for some reason the goal that you have defined does not fit over here, then it's not a practical goal. It's probably an emotional goal. Right? Like, I want to be a superstar is specific. It's not as if, I want to be a superstar greater than Shah Rukh Khan, is specific. And when you become a superstar, you can measure it. Anybody will say that achievable hai, but if you're a 50-year-old thinking about it, I don't know. People may say common sensically, maybe not. Is it realistic? Is it time bound? We don't know. So I think getting to decide what our goals should be should ideally be using this definition of, is it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound? Then, therefore, looking at, I want to hang up my boots and do something, in retirement in terms of, financial freedom. I want financial freedom by the time I'm 45. I want to start a business by the time I'm 55, and those things are specific. They can be measured. They could be achievable. I want to send my kids to the best animation school in New Zealand. That's again very specific, measurable, achievable. You can make it time bound based on where your kids are in their educational journey and things like that. According to me, when you think about goals, the first goal that you should prioritize is retirement और फाइनेंशियल फ्रीडम कहिए उसको. और मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूं क्योंकि मेरा ये मानना है कि आप जब अपने गोल्स के बारे में सोचते हैं तो उसको प्रायोरिटाइज करने का तरीका ऐसा है कि क्या आपको उस गोल के लिए बड़ा सस्ता सा लोन मिल सकता है या नहीं. अगर आपको बड़ा सस्ता सा लोन मिल सकता है तो उसको प्रायोरिटाइज मत कीजिए, क्योंकि कहीं अगर आपके सेविंग्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट्स में कहीं अगर गैप पड़ गया तो आप सस्ते से लोन लेकर के उसको फुलफिल कर सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर उस गोल के लिए लोन सस्ता में नहीं आता, बहुत कीमती लोन्स मिलते हैं या लोन मिलता ही नहीं है, then you have to prioritize it. And retirement is the only financial goal in the world for which you don't get a loan. Retirement is the only financial goal in the world for which you don't get a loan. There are things like reverse mortgage in other markets, but they're and in India, it's very complicated. It's not very helpful. It's not yet very developed. So that is the reason why you prioritize retirement, because you have to start as early as you can and put as much money aside as you can for your financial freedom, because you don't get a loan for it, right? Many people mostly prioritize their children's education, which is not wrong. It's an emotional decision. You can do it. But if you think about it, you can get education loans today from public sector banks and various other places. If you have a gap, you can take a loan and you can, sort of do it. right? I planned for my daughter's education 10 years ago, and I was thinking that if I send her to Singapore, वहां पे annual fees होंगे करीब करीब 20 लाख. जब मैं प्लान कर रहा था 10 साल पहले, 20-22 लाख का शायद खर्चा हो सकता है. Singapore is a safe country for my daughter. I have some relatives and cousins there, so it should be okay and things like that. But my daughter ended up being so brilliant that she cracked the top 20 universities, and she's gone to Boston University, where the fee is 2.5 times what I planned for. So how can you plan for these things, right? You can make it specific, measurable, achievable, but then that, okay, you can take a loan. Of course, I didn't need to take a loan. Fortunately, I had investments that I could rearrange. But I'm just saying that it is something where loans are available to do. But retirement is something for which a loan is not available, so you prioritize. Now, when you think about goals के बारे में जब सोचते हैं तो कौरव कौन है? कौरव है recency bias या loss aversion bias. इसका मतलब ये कि कोविड हो गया, मोदी जी ने लॉकडाउन अनाउंस कर लिया, तो मार्केट्स नेगेटिव होने लग गए. तो इतना बड़ा अगर कुछ हादसा हो रहा है पूरी दुनिया भर में, तो हमें सारा पैसा निकाल करके जो है गोल्ड में डालना चाहिए, या हमें घर पे रखना चाहिए, या हमारा मार्केट से पैसा हमें जल्दी से उतरना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये तो सारा मार्केट ही बंद हो जाएगा. मतलब द बिग थिंग्स दैट हैपन इन द वर्ल्ड will have an impact on you. Recency bias is जो कुछ recent होता है उसका आपके ऊपर असर या impact बहुत बड़ा हो सकता है. And the way to think about it is how aligned are your smart goals and purpose. यानी कि जब ऐसा कोई एक सिचुएशन आता है, the best way to think about it is जब 8 साल पहले मैंने ये गोल के बारे में सोचा था, जो मुझे और 6 साल बाकी है, तो किस रीजन, किस वजह और क्या गोल के साथ मैंने उसको इन्वेस्ट किया था, क्या वो चेंज्ड है आज की तारीख में? एंड इफ इट इज नॉट चेंज्ड, रिगार्डलेस इफ द मार्केट has gone down 10%, 20%, don't touch it, right? You should be able to have the confidence saying I have 6 more years. And markets के खबर के बारे में हमने बात की. मैंने फैक्ट्स ये देखा है कि ज्यादातर 9 महीने से 12 महीने के अंदर अंदर markets do bounce back from sigma 2 events, and बड़ा सा जब standard deviation ज्यादा होता है, volatility होता है, तो markets do bounce back. So let me not take a knee jerk reaction to anything that has happened recently, but people unfortunately end up getting affected by what happens just on that day, yesterday, कि क्या होता है, उसके बारे में हम लोग सोचते हैं, and then we take that decision. So that's the other goal. The next is tarika, strategy. So once you've decided irada kya hai, you have to figure out कि ये इस इरादे को अगर हमें मीट करना है तो तरीका क्या होना चाहिए. Now, obviously for the army, it is about strategy and tactics. It is about strategy and tactics to you as well. But your most important objective with the strategy has to be कि मैं risk कैसे कम करूं, mitigate, मैं अपने risk को कैसे mitigate कर सकता हूं. और आपके लिए strategy में आपको याद रखना है कि एक sequence होता है. ये सीक्वेंस बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. पहला हाउस होल्ड बजटिंग, फिर प्रोटेक्शन, फिर सेविंग, फिर इन्वेस्टमेंट, फिर वेल्थ ट्रांसफर. ये सीक्वेंस, मैंने पहला आमदनी क्या है, खर्चे क्या है और बच क्या रहा है. और आपको जब ये पता चलता है कि अच्छा ठीक है, मेरे महीने भर महीने में सेविंग्स ये है, देन द फर्स्ट थिंग इन द सीक्वेंस इज हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस एंड लाइफ इंश्योरेंस. ओनली देन विल यू मूव टुवर्ड्स सेविंग एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट. So even with the young ones in the family, it's important to tell them that पहला जब surpluses बने, तो first take health insurance and life insurance, the best ones, asking your advice. उसके बाद जो surplus बचने लगता है प्रीमियम भरने के बाद, you start an emergency fund for maybe about 6 months of your monthly expenses, or if you want to be more conservative, 1 year of your monthly expenses. उसके साथ क्या होगा कि कहीं अगर कुछ मेडिकल इमरजेंसी आई, इफ यू लूज अ जॉब, इफ समथिंग हैपेंस टू द इकोनॉमी, you can't go to work, this 1 year money will be able to sustain you. 1 year of expenses. तो हर महीने का जो भी आपका एक्सपेंस हो, अगर लाख रुपया हो तो 12 लाख रुपए या 6 लाख रुपए, जैसा आपका कंजर्वेटिव या एग्रेसिव रहना चाहते हो आप. तो अगर आप ज्यादा कॉन्सर्वेटिव रहना चाहते हो तो 12 लाख रुपए आप एक बैंक डिपॉजिट में या कोई अल्ट्रा शॉर्ट टर्म फंड में आप सेव करके रख दीजिए. उसके बाद हमारी SIP, लमसम इन्वेस्टमेंट, इक्विटी वगैरह होता है. एंड देन वी हैव टू थिंक अबाउट हाउ टू मेक माय विल, हाउ टू मेक श्योर दैट दिस विल गो टू द राइट पीपल, थिंग्स लाइक दैट. तो ये सीक्वेंस, स्ट्रेटजी के लिए सीक्वेंस इंपॉर्टेंट होता है. So think about this as sequence. The second in the strategy is that आपके पास 7 अलग अलग अपॉर्चुनिटी है जहां पे आप इन्वेस्ट करके पैसा बना सकते हो। आप भले अमेरिका में हो, चाइना में हो, यूरोप में हो, अफ्रीका में हो, इंडिया में हो, 7 ही ऐसे एसेट क्लासेस हैं जिसमें आप पैसा बना सकते हो। इक्विटी, डेट, गोल्ड एंड प्रेशियस मेटल्स, कमोडिटीज, करेंसी, रियल एस्टेट एंड ऑल्टरनेट्स। ऑल्टरनेट्स का डेफिनेशन ये है कि इन चीजों में ऐसे चीजें जिसमें आप पैसे लगा सकते हैं, जिसमें आप पैसे बना भी सकते हैं, बाकायदा पैसे बनाते हैं लोग, लेकिन अगर आपको लंबे समय के लिए डेटा चाहिए इसको कंपेयर करने के लिए कि क्या ये ऑल्टरनेट जो मुझे दिख रहा है वो इक्विटी के बराबर कैसा है, फिक्स डिपॉजिट के बराबर कैसा है, गोल्ड के बराबर कैसा है, तो वो आपको डेटा बिल्कुल नहीं मिले। कंपेयर करने का डेटा जहां पे नहीं मिले लेकिन पैसे बिल्कुल बन सकते हैं, वो ऑल्टरनेट हो। और मैं आपको इसकी एग्जाम्पल दे सकता हूं। बिटकॉइन। बिटकॉइन इसीलिए ऑल्टरनेट है कि ऐसा नहीं है कि उसमें पैसा बन नहीं सकता या लोगों ने पैसा नहीं बनाया या गंवाया, लेकिन बिटकॉइन के बारे में अगर हमें 30 साल का इंफॉर्मेशन चाहिए कि बिटकॉइन और इक्विटी के बीच, बिटकॉइन और गोल्ड के बीच, बिटकॉइन और इंटरेस्ट रेट के बीच क्या कनेक्शन है, खबर, सेकेंड जो स्टेप थी खबर, वो खबर ही अगर नहीं है तो आप डिसीजन कैसे लोगे? फैक्ट्स ही आपके पास नहीं है तो फिर आपको ओपिनियंस पे डिसीजन लेना पड़ेगा। देखिए, पिछले 100 सालों में सबसे ज्यादा जो लोगों ने, निवेशकों ने पैसा बनाया है इक्विटी। क्या आपको यह पता है कि दूसरा एसेट क्लास ऐसा कौन सा है इक्विटी के बाद जिसमें सबसे ज्यादा पैसे बने? एंड दैट एसेट क्लास इज वाइन। वी डोंट इवन नो, बिकॉज इसका इंफॉर्मेशन बहुत कम होता है। इंटरनेशनली बिल्कुल मिलता है, शायद इंडेक्सेस भी होंगे, जो भी होंगे। आपको ये तो खबर है कि लोग वाइन में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, रेयर वाइन्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, पेंटिंग्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, एंटीक्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, वॉचेस में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, कार्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं। तो ये सारा हो गया ऑल्टरनेट्स, जिसमें अगर आपको उस एसेट क्लास के बारे में लंबे समय के लिए आपको अगर डेटा चाहिए, आपको जब डेटा नहीं मिलेगा तो उसको ऑल्टरनेट्स कहते हैं। लेकिन वो कोई खराब चीज नहीं है, आप उसमें पैसा बना सकते हो। आपको बस चौकन्ना रहना है कि मैं कितना परसेंटेज एसेट एलोकेशन करूं। That is the strategy and the tactics that your advisor will help you with. It is not that Bitcoin is bad, but to say that I don't know, you don't know, let's just put 5 rupees. So even if 5 becomes 0, it's okay. My other 95% of the portfolio will come back to 100. But people make the mistake of saying बहुत पैसे बन रहे हैं Bitcoin में, चलो 50 रुपए डाल देते हैं, अगले हफ्ते मुझे इसका रिटर्न मिल जाएगा। जैसे कि हर दिन, हर हफ्ते बिटकॉइन का प्राइस जब ऊपर जा रहा था तो लोगों को ऐसा लगा कि ये बहुत पैसा बन सकता है इसमें। सो दैट कैन बिकम अ बायस। सो दैट इज व्हाट इज ऑल्टरनेट। 80 साल पहले इक्विटी ऑल्टरनेट था। किसी को ये पता नहीं था कि ब्रोकर क्या करता है, इसमें क्या खबर है, कौन सी कंपनी की क्या बैलेंस शीट होती है, किसी को नहीं पता था। लेकिन पैसे बनते थे इक्विटी में। आज जाकर के इक्विटी एक नॉर्मल एसेट क्लास है जहां पे आपको 100 साल की इंफॉर्मेशन आपको गूगल पे मिल जाएगी कि हाउ आर साइकिल्स, हाउ डू इक्विटी मार्केट्स परफॉर्म, व्हाट आर डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स, व्हाट दे डू, सारा इंफॉर्मेशन डेट के बारे में, गोल्ड के बारे में, रियल एस्टेट के बारे में, कमोडिटीज के बारे में। सो दिस इज everything to do with strategy, sequence, and what are the 7 asset classes in which I'm going to put money. Asset allocation in these 7 asset classes is the strategy. What should be the proportion that is good for me, my family, in these 7 asset classes is your strategy. What you choose within that honestly does not matter. There is a lot of research to say कि आपने equity में कोटक म्यूचुअल फंड लिया, पीजिम म्यूचुअल फंड लिया, क्वांट म्यूचुअल फंड लिया, क्या लिया, हाँ उसके लिए थोड़ा सा रिसर्च करना जरूरी है, लेकिन आपके पास इक्विटी होना जरूरी है, ये फर्स्ट स्टेप है। डेट भले फिक्स डिपॉजिट हो, बॉन्ड्स हो, गोल्ड भले वो डिजिटल गोल्ड या गोल्ड बॉन्ड्स हो, या आपने सोना खरीदा हो, ज्वेलरी खरीदा हो, थोड़ा सा उसमें कॉस्ट इंपैक्ट है, बट इवन इफ यू हैव सम गोल्ड। कमोडिटीज बहुत कम लोग इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, बट देयर आर पॉसिबिलिटीज टू इन्वेस्ट। करेंसी का एक्सपोजर होता है, रियल एस्टेट में हो सकता है, कमर्शियल हो, रेजिडेंशियल हो, लैंड हो, थिंग्स लाइक दैट। सो the percentage that you allocate, the percentage that you diversify is extremely important. Downside protection आपको आपके tactics में build करना है कि कौन सा fund, कौन सा asset में मैं invest करूंगा. This is all about strategy. This is what the advisor is required for, to show you the facts, not the opinion, about what works and why. What is the process that is used to choose for you that downside protection. यहाँ पे the Kaurav that is going to affect your brain is called risk perception, which means overestimating and underestimating probability of your bet. आपका पैसा है, आप पैसा लगा रहे हो, एडवाइजर कह रहा है कि आपको इस तरीके से डिवर्सिफाई करना चाहिए, लेकिन आपको लग रहा है कि नहीं, रियल एस्टेट में पैसा लगाओ, रियल एस्टेट में पैसा आज के तारीख में बहुत एडवर्टीजमेंट्स आ रहे हैं, बहुत लोग लगा रहे हैं और यहाँ पे बहुत एप्रिसिएशन हो सकता है, या बिटकॉइन को देखो उड़ रहा है हर दिन न्यूज़पेपर में, तो शायद यहाँ पे लगाना चाहिए, या डायरेक्टली स्टॉक्स में लगना चाहिए. तो ये जो रिस्क परसेप्शन है, वी ओवर एस्टिमेट, वी अंडर एस्टिमेट what is the probability of our bet. And the question to ask is just very, very simple. Are you following the sequence? And are you reasonably diversified in your portfolio? If you have done this much as an investor, आपने तरीका, ये जो स्टेप है, आपने वो पार कर लिया. जमीनी निशान, खबर, इरादा, तरीका. So that sequence and how to think about it, if you think about it in your head about your investments and what question to ask when. जमीनी निशान में मैं कितना वाइड मेरा स्कोप है, क्या मैं सिर्फ इंडिया के बारे में सोच रहा हूं कि बाकी भी सेक्टर्स, स्टॉक्स हैं, एसेट क्लासेस है जिसकी खबर होनी चाहिए. फिर खबर, क्या मैं फैक्ट के ऊपर एक्ट कर रहा हूं, क्या मैं ओपिनियन सुन के मेरा डिसीजन बना रहा हूं. इरादा, क्या मेरा जो शॉर्ट टर्म गोल्स हैं और लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स हैं वो स्मार्ट है, स्पेसिफिक, मेजरेबल, अचीवेबल, रियलिस्टिक, टाइम बाउंड, जैसे जैसे. एंड देन तरीका, कि मेरा सीक्वेंस, हाउस होल्ड बजटिंग, प्रोटेक्शन, सेविंग, इन्वेस्टमेंट, वेल्थ ट्रांसफर, और डिवर्सिफिकेशन इन all of the 7 asset classes that are available to anybody in the world. मेरा क्या एक्सपोजर है, कितना होना चाहिए मेरे एज ग्रुप के लिए, मेरे फैमिली के लिए, दैट इज तरीका. अब बंदोबस्त, बंदोबस्त इज व्हाट आर द रिसोर्सेज दैट यू हैव, क्या बफर होनी चाहिए, आपके ऑप्शंस क्या आपके पास, आपका बंदोबस्त आपने क्या कर रखा हुआ है. और यहां पे होता है कि आपका पर्सनल हेल्थ एंड वेलबीइंग के लिए आप क्या कर रहे हो, ये आपने बंदोबस्त करना है, आपको ही करना है. पर्सनल फिलॉसफी आपकी हो सकती है, ये भी आपका बंदोबस्त है. ये फिलॉसफी, जो पर्सनल फिलॉसफी है, ये आपको सही रास्ते भी ले जा सकता है, आपको पीछे भी रख सकता है, आपको आगे भी ले जा सकता है. अगर आपकी पर्सनल फिलॉसफी आ रही है कि पिछले जमाने में क्या हुआ, मेरे बाप दादाजी क्या कहते थे, वो उनके समय के लिए ठीक है, लेकिन वो लेसन्स, बिकॉज दे आर एल्डर्स, बिकॉज दे आर आवर पेरेंट्स, वी बिलीव that it should exactly be the same that we should follow, because they have experienced gains or losses based on their philosophy, and they will want their philosophy to be your philosophy. You should have your own philosophy because you are living in today's world. In their world, there was a second world war maybe, and they have seen different things. They have seen capitalism, they have seen the falling of this, they have seen long inflationary periods. Today it's a different world. Today we have seen COVID. Today we've seen so many other things. So we have to make our philosophy by learning a little bit from the past and also forming our own philosophy. Our personal skills are the ones from which we make our income. And we may have other sources of income like rent from a property or dividends from some investments, things like that. तो जो आपको wealth create करने का जो बंदोबस्त है, इसमें ये सारा चीज आता है. और मैंने पर्सनल हेल्थ और वेलबीइंग को पहला इसलिए रखा क्योंकि अगर आपका टारगेट 10 करोड़ का है या 100 करोड़ का है, व्हाट इज द यूज ऑफ दैट 10 और 20 और 100 करोड़ इफ यू आर गोइंग टू बी लाइंग इन अ हॉस्पिटल बेड? देयर इज नो यूज. तो बंदोबस्त जो स्टेप है, वो बंदोबस्त स्टेप में इन चीजों की जो है खबर रखना या इन चीजों के बारे में सोचना, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है. दूसरी बात, आज इंश्योरेंस है, म्यूचुअल फंड्स हैं, पीएमएस हैं, LRS है, जो liberalized remittance scheme where you can take Indian rupees up to $250,000 abroad. There are loans, there is pension, there is will. There are these tools. Bandobast is the tools that you can use for what you want to do. And the only mantra in Bandobast when you're using this is diversification. concentration is always a killer. So if you put all your money in equity, or most of your money in real estate, or most of your money in some other investment, it could be a concentration risk that you're running. Please remember that the maximum wealth in this world is made by concentration. You see the dichotomy I'm trying to say? Elon Musk ने अगर पैसा इतना बनाया है to be the richest man, it is one stock. अगर वॉरेन बफेट के बारे में बात करते हैं तो उसके इन्वेस्टमेंट्स, right? They have made money because of concentration. Bill Gates has become one of the richest people because of Microsoft. Adani because of Adani, Reliance because of Reliance. So concentration can create superb wealth. But then, is that the norm? Is that the average for everybody or not? Is the question. Nobody should stop you from trying to create the best wealth that you want in concentration if you're going there. But the risk is also the highest when it comes to concentration. So for an average investor, for an above average investor, for an intelligent investor, for a temperamentally good investor, diversification can also get you tremendous wealth. The problem is when that concentration, which has high risk, takes away your money or breaks your wealth or gives you losses. That's when wealth is not created. So diversification becomes there. What is the bias? The Kaurava. यहाँ पे इस step में जो Kaurava है वो ये है, it's called being captivated by stories. आप सारा पैसा लेके रिटायरमेंट के लिए भी इंश्योरेंस में पैसा डालते हो, इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए भी इंश्योरेंस में पैसा डालते हो, लाइफ इंश्योरेंस के लिए भी इंश्योरेंस में ही पैसा डालते हो. दैट बिकम्स व्हाई? बिकॉज आपको लगता है कि नहीं, बहुत एडवर्टीजमेंट मैंने देखी है, वो तो राहुल द्रविड़ कह रहा है, ये तो सचिन तेंदुलकर ने बोला है, अमिताभ बच्चन बोल रहा है, ये तो मतलब वी गेट कैप्टिवेटेड बाय आवर हीरोज एंड बाय आवर स्टोरीज. सर उठा के जियो. हाँ बिल्कुल, मुझे भी लाइफ में यही जो है रिस्पेक्ट और डिग्निटी चाहिए, तो हम स्टोरीज और एडवर्टाइजिंग में घुस जाते. एंड आई थिंक वी मेक पुअर डिसीजंस बिकॉज वी थिंक ये बस यही है, म्यूचुअल फंड ही है सब लाइफ में, मतलब इसी में लगाना है. नहीं, बहुत सारे डिवर्सिफाई करने के लिए जो है there are things to do. There are things for which to take a loan. There are things for which not to take a loan. There are things for which you need insurance at the lowest cost. There are things which you need mutual funds or PMS or EIF to do. So, and there are things to do with currency, with real estate. So there are many things that you can do, right? So don't be captivated by story. Real estate, for instance, have you seen it? आप जब रियल एस्टेट की एडवर्टीजमेंट देखते हो, और आप हमारे में से सबको ये एक्सपीरियंस रहा होगा, वो क्या बनाते हैं? सैंपल फ्लैट बनाते हैं, और हम सैंपल फ्लैट देखने निकल जाते हैं या सैंपल बंगला देखने निकल जाते हैं, और देखने के बाद ऐसा लगता है वाह, जिंदगी हो तो ऐसी, मतलब ऐसा फ्लैट होना चाहिए. उन्होंने उनका पूरा जो पावर है मार्केटिंग का, उन्होंने लगा दिया उस सैंपल फ्लैट में, या तो वो उसमें हम we get emotionally drawn into that story because, as I told you, Dhritarashtra is blind. The Kaurava is कि आपने जो देखा, जो सुना, जो परखा कि बस ये बहुत अच्छा है, ये मुझे चाहिए, and we fall for it. Of course, it's human. I'm not saying that we are all superpower gods to not be captivated by stories. Life is about stories. We ourselves have our own stories, which is fine. But just being aware in your investment journey about the stories that is coming in front of you is the important. The question is to ask is, मैं जब अपने हेल्थ, अपने वेलबींग, अपनी पर्सनल फिलॉसफी, मेरी पर्सनल फिलॉसफी क्या कोई स्टोरीज से इन्फ्लुएंस हो रही है? या मेरा जो स्किल है, जो जहां पे मैं डिवर्सिफाई या कॉन्सेंट्रेट करना चाह रहा हूं, am I putting a concentrated bet in something because I'm being captivated by some story? And what is the fact? Can I also look at the facts of this and then take a good decision? And that is the point. एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, आर्मी के लिए जैसे मैंने कहा कि क्या आप फॉरेस्ट तक रात तक पहुंच रहे हो? क्या आप रिवर पार करके डॉन के पहले आपने उस तरफ पहुंच के, हैव यू आइडेंटिफाइड द प्लेस वेयर आपके साथियों को बंदी बनाया हुआ है? हैव यू रीच्ड बैक अक्रॉस द ब्रिज बाय 6 o'clock in the evening, and have you put all of the devices to blow up the bridge by 8 o'clock before you come back? I mean, सब हर चीज का जो होता है एक मेजरमेंट, एक गोल की मेजरमेंट और मॉनिटरिंग होती है. सो फॉर यू दैट बेंचमार्क टाइम टू गोल शुड बी योर बेंचमार्क. लोग सेंसेक्स को, निफ्टी TRI, BSE SR, स्मॉल मिड कैप इंडेक्स, सारे बेंचमार्क्स होते हैं. लेकिन according to me, if you are following a goal planning approach to your wealth creation, then your time to goal is your benchmark. And then from there, you look at what rate of compounding I need to get to that goal. Am I going to get it or not? Is there something that is going to disturb my sequence of return or not? Those are the questions that one needs to ask. So you could look at even a bank FD and say, as long as my money is more than a bank FD and following the nominal growth of the country's economy, I'm fine. My money is growing well. Simplest level, बहुत ही simple level पे. शायद हर घर में इन्फ्लेशन अलग हो सकता है. न्यूज़पेपर में हो रहा है कि 6% है, 7.4% है, whatever that number is. But if you have old parents at home who have medical conditions, maybe your inflation is higher. If you have young children who are ready to go abroad for education, your inflation is going to be higher. If you are alone and you're staying in your parents' house, your inflation is going to be lower. So there are many pros and cons for inflation in your house. And knowing that also as a metric of measurement is important, because I told you inflation and interest rates are connected. Interest rates and every investment is connected. So knowing that. And the core जहां पे जो नेगेटिव बायस है वो होगा रिजल्ट ओरिएंटेशन. माने आप सिर्फ जज ऐसा करोगे कि अच्छा मैं मेरा अकाउंट स्टेटमेंट देख रहा हूं और इसमें तो -3% दिख रहा है, पिछले 3 महीने का रिटर्न ऐसा हुआ है, ये क्या हुआ? मतलब वी आर लुकिंग एट द एंड रिजल्ट टुडे. वी आर नॉट सीइंग दैट वी हैव ओनली इन्वेस्टेड फॉर 6 months. So we have a propensity to judge our decision only by the end result. We forget that we have put money only 6 months ago. In equity may even up to 3 years, we can expect a small negative return. It's okay. But after 5 and 7 years, if your goal is that much longer, you don't have to worry about it. Of course, if you have a short-term goal, you should not be in equity in the first place. So all of those things are important. And therefore, we unfortunately, however, when we are measuring things, we only look at whether it is looking green or whether it is looking red. We forget about time frames, we forget about everything else. So the question here, the way to take care of it is, don't lose sight of measuring progress of your core purpose. Like your core purpose is कि boss, I need this money after 15 years for my retirement. तो अभी ये 6 महीने में उसको जज मत करो, 2 साल में जज मत करो. Let it remain there, because you are confident that equity markets over long periods of time have always done well. You know the fact. Over 5-year cycles, they have not given negative returns anywhere in the world, 5 or 7-year cycles. So I think those are, when you work on the facts, and then you can measure yourself things much better. Last step is ghadi milao. Have a trusted third party to guide you. That can be a step. Money decisions, as I mentioned, have very strong emotional influences. And trust is the single factor that increases relationship alpha. And the bias that you will have is overconfidence. As a customer, when you're taking these decisions, the bias that you have in the Gadi Milao step is overconfidence. Many a time with our advisors, we talk, we say that, नहीं यार, मुझे पता है, my son is in the US, he's telling me about this, or my uncle is in the US, he has told me that, इसको ऐसा ही देखना चाहिए, or I have a business and I can see that, its economy is not doing very well and I don't want to have so much. So we end up having our own overconfidences, at least definitely in the short term. And I think that all you need to think about is how synchronized am I with my plan. घड़ी मिलाओ अपने plan के साथ. तो ये आपने देखा कि जमीनी निशान is your terrain, खबर is your information, इरादा is your goal, तरीका is your strategy, बंदोबस्त is your resources, administration is your review, and घड़ी मिलाओ is your discipline. This is Z-K.I.T B.A.G. जमीनी निशान, खबर, irada, tarika, bandobast, administration, khadi mila. The challenge in the first step is home bias, and you may have a narrow field, maybe take a more wider field. Ask advisors about other asset classes, other markets, and think about how much you might probably need some exposure to. Information. Take care of herd behavior, what you're listening on WhatsApp, what you're listening on TV or newspapers. It may make you end up chasing returns. And make sure that you have a good fact filter. कि fact पे काम करो, opinion पे. Goals पे देखते वक्त recency bias will always affect you. What has happened last month or last week or yesterday. Short term will always affect your goals. But just make sure that you have a priority right. जहां पे लोन नहीं मिलता, जहां पे लोन बहुत एक्सपेंसिव मिलता है, वो गोल्स पहले और बाकी के गोल्स में बाद. रिस्क परसेप्शन, स्ट्रैटेजी में आपका रिस्क परसेप्शन हो सकता है कि नहीं नहीं ये तो सही है, कोई कुछ होने वाला नहीं है, अभी तो बहुत पैसा उतरने वाला है, अभी तो बीजेपी जीतेगा ही, एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट. इट मे बी राइट, इट मे बी रॉन्ग, वी डोंट नो, बट आवर परसेप्शन इन आवर स्ट्रैटेजी plays a very big role. We oversimplify things. I think just focus on your asset allocation in those 7 asset classes: equity, fixed income, gold and precious metals, commodities, currency, real estate, alternates. Think about it, no problem. When you're thinking about your bandobast, on your personal philosophy, your personal skills, where you're allocating your money, make sure that you are not doing wrong resourcing because the story is beautiful, because some celebrity is talking about it, or it is affecting your senses in a way that it is very attractive, right? Just make sure that you have the right sequence in your bandobast. If your sequence is right, you're not going to make too many mistakes in your allocation. Result orientation, when you review your stuff, when you're looking at your numbers, you will be very result oriented. कि कितना हुआ अभी, कितना हुआ एक साल का, कितना हुआ 3 महीने का. Always look at it from you'll be very reactive when you look at result orientation. Just measure your purpose. अरे मुझे तो ये 15 साल के लिए चाहिए नहीं, अच्छा मेरी बेटी तो 2 साल की है, अभी तो वो 18 साल में जाएगी, तो I've got another 16 years for her education. Don't worry. Let's just make sure that the portfolio is good quality company. It doesn't matter if price is up or down. We will keep collecting and investing more because we know long-term fact, equity, and all of these 7 asset classes, asset allocation will help me. Last step, too much overconfidence and therefore not following your plan can happen. So it's a very human thing that we try to control randomness. We cannot control randomness. Just be in sync with your plan. So that's all that I have for my presentation today. I don't mind taking any questions, Sahil, that you may get in the chat box. But here is the only quote that I've usually used in my presentations, which I think is very important, by a gentleman called F.M. Alexander. People do not decide their futures, they decide their habits. And their habits decide their futures. And you can also say that people do not decide their financial futures. They decide their financial habits, and their financial habits decide their financial futures. So it's very similar. And a lot of our personal biases can sometimes come in the way of this. So let me stop there and, hand it over back to you, Sahil, and Rahul, and everybody else. I hope that people had a reasonably good time listening to it. It's been almost an hour. Or about 50 minutes since we started. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to take it. Or if you have any comments, Sahil, over to you.
Yes, sir. Wow, thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful session. I mean, from Mahabharata to army's lessons, what a wonderful way to explain us the planning framework and our behavioral biasness towards investments and finance as well. So I think our takeaway from this session would be like to widen our scope, then to filter the facts and prioritize our goals, make a strategy and allocate the funds resources accordingly, and keep reviewing the plan frequently more than often, and also be in sync with the mission that we want to achieve in our long-term future. So thank you so much, Ajit Menon sir, for investing your valuable time and energy for such a beautiful presentation. Now I think we can go to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or you can put it in the Q&A tab. Then we can wait for a couple of minutes, although we already have got some questions from the investors and as well as from the advisors. So we will take that in between.
Sure.
Yes, so we have got one question from Prashant sir. So his question is, if I am targeting for 8 to 10 years target, does that mean that at the end of the 2 years, if the returns are negative, is that okay? Or should I not expecting even some positive trends in the portfolio after 2 years?
So the answer to that is it is okay, even if you have negative. Of course, as a human being, we expect that we should be positive all the time. It may be just a matter of timing that just after you invested, in the next 1 or 2 years, Russia attacked Ukraine, the markets became weak, and so those things can happen. But I think if you look at the data for equity, what you will realize is that it keeps compounding and catching up. So your only worry should be how much is that negative return? So it's a very important question that you've asked, and it's a very something that is very important to capture. And I'll try to explain it without being technical, but there is something called the sequence of return. The sequence of return is that if you have, like you say, an 8 or 10-year goal, you have to first know you already know what that goal is. That goal is that you may need 1 crore because that 1 crore is going to be used to start a business or something like that in that 8-10 years, or for your children's education or something like that. Now, you also know your capacity to invest every month or a lump sum, whatever that is. Your advisor or any calculator, especially your advisor, will tell you that if you have this kind of a surplus on a monthly basis or annual basis to reach that goal of 1 crore at the end of 8 or 10 years, you need a compounding of 12%. It should not be lower. If it is higher, it's good, but it should not be lower. The important point is to stick to that 12% asset allocation of the kind of funds that you've invested in to get you that 12%, because you will surely get to that 1 crore if you're getting a 12% average return. Now, you know, and I know that you are not going to get 12% guaranteed every year. It'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up, it'll go down, right? So sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. But if you have an asset allocation that gives you that 12%, you will reach the goal that you want in 8 or 10 years' time. The mistake that a lot of people make is, even after knowing that you need that 12%, which can come from let's say, a diversified equity fund, they will look at the newspaper, they will look at the khabar, they will look at the recency bias and say, "Arey, ye mid-cap fund ne to 43% return diya hai last year. So why don't we put in mid-cap? The mid-cap category is looking very good. And we may not need mid-caps for that goal." Of course, long-term goals do require mid and small caps. But I'm just saying that, for instance, if that is not required for you, some thematic fund, कि मैं defense fund में डाल रहा हूँ, कि मैं कोई ऐसा fund में डाल रहा हूँ which is very thematic, which has given very great returns in the last year, and you will end up putting money there, and then you will see that when you are always putting money when you're attracted by the story and the returns, and the next 2 years it's negative. If your negative becomes -15, -20, then you should worry. But if you believe in your discussion with your advisor that you have an 8-10-year goal, you need between 11 to 12% return to get you there, and your portfolio volatility of what are the kind of funds you have are not thematic, where it will give you a deep negative in 1 or 2 years, then it's fine. But if it is given you a deep negative, then you need to worry, because then sequence of return will be broken. So you must expect positive returns. Sometimes you may get it, mostly you should get it in 2 years' time. But sometimes if you had invested maybe in 2006 or 7, in 2008, you would have seen a big negative in 1.5 years' time. If you had invested just before the pandemic in 2018 or 19, for a couple of months in 2020, you would have seen a negative return. That can happen. And then, subsequently markets have recovered and things like that as well. So Praveen has a question on which equity class looks best to invest for the long term. Now, equity is an asset class to invest for the long term. And therefore, if you ask Pentagraph to show you data about which equity class, whether it is large cap or mid cap or small cap, that looks good over the long term, if you look at data over a 10-15 year cycle, all three do the same. थोड़ा बहुत फर्क है, आगे पीछे का थोड़ा फर्क. But if you look at short-term cycles of 5 years and things like that, sometimes large cap does better than mid and small cap, sometimes mid cap does better than large and small, and sometimes small cap does better than all three. Mostly mid and small caps will do better than large caps if it is 3, 5 years, 6 years, 7-year cycles. But if you take it to 12 and 15 years, all three are more or less similar. That's what happens. So I would say that in India, if you are today a young investor, there is no harm in having a little extra allocation to good mid and small cap funds as well. But if you don't want to take any risk because in your house you have some emergencies, some dependencies, you have siblings to take care of, you have parents who may have medical conditions, you want to be a little conservative, then any good flexi cap or multi-cap fund is good enough to invest in, because you'll get all three flavors, mid, small cap, fill it, shut it, forget it in one product. So you can do that as well. Chetan has a question about how important is debt, and is it a conservative bias which leans you on debt even if horizon is 10 years? Not at all. I think people tend to think of debt as conservative, but to me, it is the asset allocation which is smart. So what percentage of debt you should have is the key question to ask. If you are, if you have, you have heard bad things about equity in your family, you've had bad experiences with equity, and therefore most of your money is in fixed deposit and debt, that's conservative. And that may not help you get to the goals you want. But you're putting money, you have an emergency fund which is put in a debt or a fixed deposit. You're a person who has a certain allocation to equity, but you're not 100%, it's 60%. You need 30% in debt. Fine. I mean, that I think is part of your asset allocation based on your goal. If your goal is 6 months away, 1 year away, 2 years away, I would be 100% in debt or a conservative hybrid fund for that goal. If my goal is 6 years away, 8 years away, 10, 15 years away, I'll only be in equity. I'll not be in debt based on all the data cover that we have about it right now. Right. So that is the way to think about it. I think that there is no conservative bias on debt. It's about how it fits in the asset allocation for what purpose. If your goals are short term, 100% debt, no problem. That's not conservative bias. That's being smart. Right. I'll give you an example. My daughter was supposed to go for her higher education when she finished her 12th standard and I was talking about it earlier, in 2020. And I have a financial advisor who so I don't manage my own money. After talking about all these biases, I follow it myself for the last 13 years. I have an advisor who's made a financial plan for my retirement, for my children's education, and I've been following it for so many years. So when my daughter was small, when I made the plan, my wife and I, she was to do her 12th standard in 2020 and then go abroad for her studies. And you know what happened in 2020 when I had to pay the semester fees, the market was down 40%, right? But my advisor had one rule that he followed in his financial planning process, and Pentagraph will also have it for all of your financial planning. You would have heard them talk about it. When you're very close to a long-term goal, take money out of the equity and put it into fixed income. So my advisor, 9 months back, had taken all of the investment money for my daughter over the last 10 years that we had saved for her education, and he had put it into a safe liquid fund, an ultra short-term fund. So when the market crashed 40%, I had zero impact on my investments for my daughter because I had already moved to equity 9 months before my goal, and my daughter's goal was August 2020. And therefore, I had already gone into fixed income in 2019 because my advisor had a very strict process that he was following. 100% debt. So the process becomes the hero. And, that's not being conservative. It helped me from not having the financial anxiety to say, oh my God, all of my investments are down 40% just when I have to pay my fees for my daughter. Right? I was saved by the process of my advisor. So fixed income plays different roles. Prashant said he's invested in large cap stocks. Yeah, absolutely fine. Have a good mix of all kinds of stocks is fine. If you like large cap stocks, as I told you, over 10, 15 years, there's no big difference between the returns you'll get from that versus what you will get from any other asset class as well. Maybe a little difference, that's all. How sensible, and Sandeep has questioned that, to follow the guidance of remaining invested, knowing market is overheated and expect some correction. Isn't this an oversold concept? It serves the fund managers very well who are the experts in the industry. You're absolutely right, Sandeep. I mean, there is no reason to remain invested in the markets when you know that it is overheated. All I will tell you is, do you think the market is overheated as an opinion or khabar? You have looked at the facts that the valuation is stretched. And if the valuations are stretched, then you are only thinking about adjusting your portfolio from maybe 60 or 70% equity exposure down to 30, not making it zero. And that again is where an advisor will come and help you, but based on your goal. Now, if your goal, according to me, is 10 years away, then I don't think anything matters whether it is overheated, underheated, or so. You will only be tinkering with your portfolio, not knowing whether, what are you going to do after redeeming it from an overheated market? Where are you going to put it? Okay, you will put it in a bank deposit or a fixed income or whatever. Okay, then what? When are you going to get back into the market? Do you know that the market is very cheap? Maybe not. So we can never time the tops and the bottoms, but it's a very wise decision for you to be aware that the market is overheated. The next step for you is खबर. What is the fact? कितना overheated है? और ये overheat क्या पहले cycles में बहुत सालों के लिए चला है, या मैं बहुत जल्दी निकलने वाला हूं इस चीज के साथ? अच्छा, मेरा गोल कितना दूर है? Is my goal reasonably 5 or 7 years away? Do I need to react to what is happening? And then what should I, for my goal and my sequence of return, I have already, my sequence of return for my goal, which is 5 years ago, was 12%. And I'm looking at my account statement and I'm seeing that I'm at 16%. Fantastic decision to cut a little bit of equity and put it into a hybrid fund or a fixed income fund. That's fine. So I think all I'm saying is your opinion, this is an opinion that you have. That opinion is correct. Is it based on facts? You have to check for yourself along with your advisor. Ki for me, what is important? It is good for the fund manager or experts of the industry. Their job is कि आपने अगर पैसा दिया है तो हमें manage करना है. We can't take the cash call. If I take a cash call, then it's a human decision. I think that बहुत overheated है. Sometimes the market can be overheated for 3 or 5 years, and then somebody will complain कि boss आपने तो पूरा cash में रख दिया, क्यों कर दिया आपने? So how do you do that? So fund managers are manufacturers. They can't take that call. You and the advisors can take a call. Ki, based on my goal, I need to get out right now or not. So when we are collecting money as fund managers and we are managing our funds, we are getting people who have invested just yesterday for a 15-year-old goal. We have people who have invested 10 years ago for a 12-year goal. जिसका 2 साल में पैसा निकालना है, and that person may have to take a different decision from the person who's invested yesterday. So for us it's difficult to take the cash call. For you, just make sure that it is based on certain facts and not opinion, and based on what your goal requires. So there's Shreyans Kothari who's asking whether I have invested in crypto assets. I have not invested in crypto assets. I have been evaluating it. My fund, my fund advisor, my advisor who manages my money, is currently studying crypto assets. It's been last year or so we had discussions, and they are studying NFTs, crypto assets, digital currencies. And whenever they are ready to have those discussions, I'll be happy to learn what they have learned and then decide whether I need to do something about it or not. But I do invest in paintings. I like art. And as you know, that's an alternate as well. It's like saying कि अगर आपके पास 5 लाख होता श्रेयांश और मेरे पास 5 लाख होता, तो आप क्रिप्टो में लगाइए, मैं एक अच्छा सा पेंटिंग खरीद लेता हूँ. पता नहीं, कोई फेमस पेंटर नहीं, 5 लाख में जो भी मिले अच्छा आर्टिस्ट का मैं ले लेता हूँ. The probability that you are right or I'm right, or you are wrong or I'm wrong, is equal 5 years from now, because there is no information that you and I can use कि ये artist famous होगा, नहीं famous होगा, इसका ये जो series है वो investment अच्छा है नहीं है, and you don't have information to say whether that crypto asset will do well or not well. So it's equal. So when you look at alternates as an asset class and as a basket, you can make your choices, and everything is legitimate. What percentage of money you put into that crypto or that alternate is the most important question. That's where your advisor can help you. So I have a couple of paintings that I've invested into. So that's my sort of alternate investment. Sandeep has a question on the follow-up. You can see PMS is having a tough time explaining to investors why market is doing well and not their portfolio. Some PMSs struggle, some PMSs don't. The reality is that fund manager styles and portfolios go through cycles exactly like the market's going through cycles. If the market, for instance, today, the market is doing something it has not done in 10 years, which is that the value part of the market is doing much better than the growth part of the market. And therefore, fund managers like PGIM, for instance, who are very high growth managers, because that's what we believe India will be over the next 5, 10, 15 years, is not doing too well at all. And people who have value investing styles are doing extremely well. Similarly, in a PMS, if the fund manager is a value style PMS manager, he may be doing very well, and a growth style manager may not be doing well, or he may be doing an average, not as good as a value manager. Some people have mix of styles. So I think the only way to answer this is that it is not a PMS that does badly or good. It is not a fund that does badly or good. It's a style for a certain time in the market that does badly or good. It's a certain process that one is following, which might do badly or good in a short period of time. And the only way for an investor, which even I do, is ask the question that how many styles do I have in my portfolio? How diversified is my portfolio? मुझे वो contra fund भी चाहिए, मुझे वो growth भी चाहिए, मुझे वो value भी चाहिए. तो मेरे पास तो सब होनी चाहिए. But you will see that in a certain time of the market, there are certain type of fund managers and certain type of schemes which are doing very well. And you will ask your advisor, मैं इस fund में अभी भी पैसा क्यों लगाए बेटा? एक साल से अच्छा नहीं कर रहा ये PMS. देखो बाकी के funds कैसे करें. यहाँ से निकालो, उसमें डालो. Which means you are concentrating your effort towards a style that is working in today's market. And all of the fund managers, all of the PMSs, all the funds you're going after is following a similar style. It is okay in your portfolio when one or two funds that you have been given by your advisor is doing badly. It may do badly in a cycle. It's okay, because when the markets turn, those managers will do well and the other managers may do badly. I told you that interest rate has a big impact. Good quality portfolios get impacted badly when interest rates go up. And when interest rates come down, good quality portfolios do much better than. When I say good quality, what I mean is growth-oriented portfolios versus value-oriented portfolios. So there is a difference that one must understand, that if these are human fund managers. Yes, they can also make mistakes in their investing. That's a different issue, and that's a legitimate and different issue. But it's the style that ultimately delivers what it is, and your job is tariqa, strategy, diversify. I don't want to put my money in PMS, or I want some there, some here. But the thing that investors usually forget to ask, am I collecting managers in mutual funds and PMSs who have similar styles based on their return history today? Because आज जब मैं बैठ के एडवाइजर से बात कर रहा हूं, मैं 3 साल का परफॉर्मेंस देख रहा हूं, मैं 5 साल का देख रहा हूं, मैं 10 साल का देख रहा हूं, और आज के तारीख में जो ये 3, 5 और 10 साल में जो जिन लोगों ने अच्छा किया हुआ है वो टॉप में आ रहा है, तो मेरे पैसे वहीं लगना चाहिए. Honestly, you will be surprised that if you put your money in all 3 buckets, including what is not performing today, you will see in the next cycle they will perform, and the ones which are performing may be actually average. So diversifying your styles is more important. Praveen has a question on a stock. Unfortunately, we fund managers can't talk stocks on calls. These are SEBI rules. And I think that, as I told you, you can use a lot of common sense based on Z-K.I.T B.A.G. Maybe you will come to the right answer. Are NFOs of mutual funds, Chetan's asking, better than established funds, and should we move funds to NFOs at regular intervals for a possible better return? The answer is an absolute no. There is no need to move money into NFOs at regular intervals for possible better returns. If you have a portfolio that you have been having, let's say 100, let's say there are 50 stocks in your portfolio that you invested 5 years ago, and today that NAV of that fund is, let's say, 35 rupees. You know, you invested in that NFO when it was 10 rupees, when it came up 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and today that NAV is 35 rupees. Today, if there's an NFO with the same stocks in the same proportion, it is just that the NAV will start at 10 rupees. But if this new NFO 10 rupees becomes 20 rupees, your 35 will become 70 anyway, because it is the same stock, same price. One is getting in now and you are in your old portfolio now. So if the market has to give a return, it will give the same to both. It is just that 10 rupee NAV will look like 20, your 35 will look like 70. So there is no reason to move into NFOs. The only reason to do NFOs is if there is a product that gives you a chance at diversification in the 7 asset classes we spoke about. So you are invested in your portfolio, equity, fixed income. Suddenly there's maybe an NFO where the fund manager is focusing on commodity as a sector or real estate as a sector. And you say that, okay, 7 asset classes, I need some exposure to real estate. I need some exposure to commodities. And when I say real estate, I'm talking about rate funds and not just stocks of real estate, because that's there in your equity portfolio as well. Or you want to buy, you know that in your portfolio you need something. Just think about the questions for diversification and nothing more than that. There is questions about views on the IT sector, for the next 6 months or 2 years. It's a sector that we are currently very light on. We are not very heavily exposed to the IT sector. We have to look at various factors that are developing around the world. Broadly, we are positive on the sector over the long term, because India has many inherent advantages too. And if you believe that the world is only becoming more and more digital, more and more digitally adopted, more and more technologically inclined, then you cannot ignore this sector. It can only be that at certain points of time, the sector may look a little overvalued versus what you may have before. And that's exactly where we are today. We might be in a lot more of the smaller companies which are nimble and flexible in the sector, and we may be at a neutral to underweight currently on the sector. But we do think that there will be a time, as cost is now, as you can read in the newspapers, for instance, that salary increments and all which were going through the roof during the COVID time is sort of beginning to come down. Slowly, as the cost structures and the margins improve, we will find our way back into looking at whether we need to be neutral weight to the sector or, have a higher weight. Okay, I think that, we've done a lot of questions, and I think that, some of this may
Yes, sir.
And I think that, whether something is at an all-time high, like Amit is asking for small cap or so, I think that, having an advisor with you, that Sarathi with you, you will find all of the answers to this based on your financial plan. If you have a 10-year goal, nothing is too high or low. If you have a 1-year goal, yes, then things are high or low, that you need to know where you need to be as part of. So let me stop there and hand it back to you, Sahil.
Yes, sir. Sir, I got a couple of questions, I think, if I can ask.
Sure.
So, as you said at the start, there are so many Kauravas or so many khabar available. So, how can we keep ourselves afloat and avoid the unnecessary noise around us? So, how can we stay focused on our goal, and how can we avoid the noise, unnecessary noise? Can you please?
I think in that information, you got to just think about 2 things, right? First is this khabar, you want to look for facts, not opinions. When you're thinking about facts, think about the trend in those facts. Don't just look at the fact that market is overvalued. That's a fact. You may say that the market is trading at a 25 PE, long-term average was 18, so it is overvalued. So that's a fact. But then look for the trend in the fact as to what happens when the market is at 25 PE. How long does it sustain at 25 PE? Even at 25 PE, are there sectors of the market that ends up doing well? 25 is the average of the entire market. Are there undervalued sectors where we can probably invest into? Those kind of things are the, questions. When you ask the right questions, you will get the right answers to some bit of those things. And so looking at for the facts, looking at the trend in those facts become a more important thing to do. The second way to think about it is if you're following a financial planning approach, which is what I recommend to anybody, then you should know the sequence of return, which basically means that, let's say that a person has 3 goals. One goal is for their retirement, which is 15 years from now. One goal is for their child's education, which is 8 years from now. And one goal is to buy a house, which is 4 years from now. And if you've made that plan with your advisor and you know how much money you have currently, what you're going to take as loan, what are you going to put down as your contribution, retirement, you need to do it yourself. What is the surplus that you are putting right now in the market, in what asset allocation, And the question on the asset allocation is because you want to know what is going to be the sequence of return. That
Right.
to reach my goal, I need for some goal, I may need a 10% return only. For some other goals, I may need a 12 or 14% return. And for some, I may just need a 7% return. So am I invested in an asset allocation, tariqa, after looking at the cupboard, that my sequence of return is not likely to be disturbed? Or am I getting influenced by a story or influenced by a recency bias saying, nahi, अभी तो चांद पे उतर गया है तो इसरो तो स्पेस का कोई अगर फंड लेके आता है तो हमें उसमें इन्वेस्ट करना पड़ेगा, हम डिफेंस के फंड में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं. These are all good, good things, but they will swing you too much with volatility. Is it really required for your portfolio? Is it really required for your goal? Does it contribute on average positively to your sequence of return? If you ask these questions and get the right answers, you're in a safe zone.
Yes, sir. I think we can conclude the session. So I really thank you so much, sir, for taking your precious time and giving your views on the behavioral investing. I really also thank each and every participant for being patient listening. So thank you, everyone. And we will see until next PentaTalk session next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day. Okay. Bye-bye, guys.